What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you, and one that I was pretty damn eager to go over because I kind of have like a long history with this band, and admittedly maybe one that I should have went over with Shred because that Entrails album really didn't do much to entice him to listen to more Entrails. So today I'm going to go over the latest offering from Abigail Williams, A Void Within Existence. This also comes out on the 18th of July on Agonia Records. This band formed in 2004 in Phoenix, Arizona initially, though I would say the bulk of their work in terms of where they've been, I would say was probably in Olympia, Washington, where they are currently located. Could be wrong on that. I believe they also spent some time on the East Coast too. I can't remember where. Anyway, this is their sixth album. I have been a fan of this band since In the Shadow of a Thousand Suns, which was kind of their big breakout album. It was pretty decent, but that was the one that seemed like it kind of caught a lot of attention. I was a big fan of their last album, Walk Beyond the Dark, which I believe in 2019, that was actually a year ender for me. And again, I've been following this band for a while, and this band, man, like in terms of like their discography, it's a lot of like up and down and a lot of like changing their sound. They started off as a more I would say like kind of like symphonic deathcore infused black metal. In the Shadow of a Thousand Suns is very much emperor worship, but it's done with, you know, kind of a Black Dahlia Murder sort of vibe to it. In fact, I believe the drummer on the previous album went on to drum for Black Dahlia Murder. I think he's the guy on Miasma, if I'm not mistaken. But this band's sound has changed a lot over the years, and sometimes from album to album, and that has probably a lot to do with the fact that there is a high turnover rate in this band. The one core member on here, Ken Sorsran, is the guy that is the vocal songwriter. And having only seen this band once early on, I can safely say that Ken Sorsran is probably the only member that is still in the band from that lineup I saw. Actually, I can almost guarantee that. But yeah, that was a really wild show. In fact, it was at a roller rink in Westland, Michigan. They're on tour with The Faceless, Decrepit Birth, Velamaya, and I think Neuraxis. But yeah, it was a makeshift stage put up in the middle of a roller rink floor that looked like it hadn't seen much action since like the 1980s. Dry venue too, which was a lot of fun because we had to go across the street and go grab booze over at the Rite Aid and drink in the parking lot like we were fucking high schoolers trying to sneak beers, you know, at prom. Anyway, back to this album. I was pretty hyped about this one. Again, I love the last one, and it seems like he has a more stable lineup now. Interestingly enough, at least listed in the current lineup of this band, Gabe Sieber is on drums, who he has drummed for a ton of bands. I believe he also drummed for Decrepit Birth. But oddly enough, it's Mike Heller that is on here, which, I mean, that dude is on everything. I just raved about him in the last Psy album. Actually, last two Psy albums. But generally this band, I kind of know somewhat to expect because, again, Ken Sorsran is the main writer in the band, and he definitely has a very particular style. It's kind of a blend of, you know, a lot of like Cascadian black metal, but you also have elements of death metal and occasionally some more progressive flair that shows up every now and then. But I have to say that this album was chock full of surprises, like stuff that I don't think this band has ever done before, alongside stuff that I very much expect from this band. Like right from the rip with the opening track, Life Disconnected, it comes in immediate, but it comes in slow and brooding and just dark and menacing. It's more of a plotting song with like these heavy, chuggy riffs and like dissonance, kind of squawky guitars on top of that. It's very groovy in it. It's very heavy and dense, and not as though like heavy wasn't something I expected from this band, but it has almost a more like death metal characteristic. Like this feels like more blackened death metal than it does straight up black metal. And this band's sound has been described as atmospheric black metal, but the atmosphere in here is very different. Like I kept comparing this one to the last one, and it's kind of night and day in terms of, well, a lot of things. First off, production-wise, this thing is heavy. This was produced by Ken, but it was mixed and mastered by Dave Otero, which this album sounds fucking awesome. It's crisp, but it still sounds organic. The guitars have so much more depth and heft to them in comparison to the last album, which I loved the mix in the last one. It's more of a straightforward kind of like black metal album. With this, there's definitely more than just black metal on it, and I feel like, you know, the tone really kind of helps that because you have a lot of sections where it gets a lot more dense and sludgy, and, you know, you can't really get that with like a really gainy tone, at least in my opinion. opinion, you can't. But yeah, immediately this opener, it just has a different vibe overall for this band in general. And as this album went on, it became, I don't know, quite an adventure, because legit every song on here is very different from one another. You do have overlapping tropes that you expect from black metal, of course, like heavy tremolos, blast beats, very ghoulish, ghastly vocals. But this album is full of interesting, sharp turns into like different territory, and songs that feel almost kind of removed from, well, I mean, it's kind of hard to center this band on one particular style, because sometimes all their albums do sound a little bit different. But you get a lot of like sharp turns into different territory that I don't think this band has really ever attempted before. Like the song Talk to Your Sleep, the only part of that that really sounds like, you know, the Abigail Williams that I feel like I've kind of gotten to know over the years are Ken's vocals. The song itself is this plodding, sludgy, almost post-metal track, like a combination of, you know, bands like Cult of Luna or LLNN from Denmark. A little bit more obscure band, but definitely worth checking out and definitely comparable to this song. But also a little bit of like Willhaven, when they're kind of like droning on heavy riffs and you kind of have that synth in the background kind of like humming along. You have this really awesome descending tremolo on top of these lurching, just kind of like dark, sludgy riffs. But the song has a very like hypnotic, like almost like post-metal vibe to it. Really awesome transitions. There's some cool tribal patterns to it, and an absolutely beautiful lead, which the lead work on here is fantastic across the board. If I'm not mistaken, this is his first album with Vance Valenzuela, which he is an awesome guitarist. I know him from his work in Veil of Panath, and he brings a little bit of like just sort of flash and like panache to all the leads. Like you get a lot of these like big heavy metal leads, but there's a lot of like just interesting nuance to his playing, and how he can like shift around in styles, I think is awesome. The end of the song, Non-Existence, well, that song definitely just kind of goes right for the black metal throat. You get a lot of heavy tremolos and blasts. The, you know, groovier sections are more like dark and foreboding, but, you know, kind of walk a line between like post-black metal and depressive black metal as well, because a lot of the themes in here are dark, about isolation, desperation, existential dread, you know, all the good things that the 2020s have given us. But through all that, there are soaring melodic moments, and the end of Non-Existence has this almost David Gilmour-like lead to it, where it just has that bluesy warmth, and I don't know, there's just something about that man's playing that is just still just hypnotic for me. And there are dynamics aplenty on here. Again, even comparing this to their last album, which I honestly think might have been one of their best, this is even more bold, even more ambitious when it comes down to like transitions and making these songs bigger, larger, more intricate, more elaborate. But it never comes across as like too pretentious, or, you know, nothing, you know, kind of goes off the rails to the point where you lose the sense of the song, you lose the mood, the whole vibe, or anything like that. These are meticulously crafted, and again, they stay in this nice, just kind of like dreary vibe overall. Well, dreary for the most part. It's not all entirely dreary. There's some like super aggressive tracks in here, like Still Nights, which honestly, again, I would say is almost more like blackened death metal. It's blasty. It's notably more aggressive. You get a lot of hefty chugging riffs on there. There's some backup gang vocals too. And there's a nasty fucking breakdown on it. And like a full on, like almost like decapitated Fear Factory-esque, like hyper machine gun chuggy breakdown. As I said, this album has like kind of fun, surprising moments that catch you off guard, but they work with the songs really well. They don't feel like they're shoehorned in there or just done for the sense of like flashiness. They actually complement the songs really well. Void from Within in particular, it really works this clever balance of like peaks and valleys. You have these very soaring, shimmering guitars over blast beats. It still sounds very sinister, but very bright. And then it sinks into these more depressive, slow sections. And you get this cool ebb and flow. But around the middle of the song, you get this really interesting transition where the blast beat pattern changes to almost like this broken up snare roll rhythm. And you get these like almost kind of like proggy little like crawls on top of it. It's a really wild moment. And then that gives way to probably one of the gloomiest moments on the album, where you kind of get these like droning riffs, but you also have like moaned choirs, or it sounds like a moaned choir, like it's moaned harmonies. And there's also like maybe like a low synth behind them. It's just moody and dark, and the additional vocal dynamics on there and those synths kind of like lifted the song up a little bit, like not in terms of like the depths of depression that it was going for, but in terms of making it more dynamic and more interesting. And atmosphere is huge on here. Like, you know, with any album that deals with like intense personal themes, which again, this has a lot of intense personal themes. You can read up on his Bandcamp, but there's a lot of like dark stuff in terms of like questioning your own existence and fighting through pain and, you know, desperation, loneliness. Like, again, all the stuff that the 2020s have been absolutely chock full of. But with any like personal album, when it's done right, you should be able to feel that. And honestly, I feel a lot of this. Like, you can feel the anxiety in spots. You can feel that quiet desperation in the more intimate moments on here, and the not so quiet desperation, the more like loud, just reaching out for anyone to listen moments. This album is somehow very intimate, but also a tidal wave of emotion. And it really comes to a head at the last track, No Less Than Death, which is probably the most different song on this album in terms of anything I have ever heard from this band. I said that about Talk to Your Sleep too, and that is true to agree, but this one's even more far removed because this song is almost entirely clean vocals. You kick off with heavy strummed acoustic guitars. There's a bit of a fiddle in the background, and then Ken comes in with these really solid cleans. They're, you know, a little bit gruff, kind of gravelly. It has a rustic vibe, and I didn't think I'd be comparing this band to like Panopticon or Wayfarer, but it has a very similar vibe to that. But as the song goes on, it becomes huge, like absolutely majestic, lush melodies. It's still very, again, despondent. It's kind of reflective overall. Again, you get this weird balance of it being a more intimate song, but also being just absolutely gigantic and almost entirely carried by clean vocals, which when I heard the clean vocals at first, like, all right, this is probably just going to be for the softer spots. And then we're going to get back into Ken screaming his guts out, which he is fucking awesome at. But I like the fact that this held on to the clean vocals all throughout the song. The harsh vocals are used very sparingly on that, but they're used very effectively. And as the song goes on, again, it gets more epic and more rousing. Honestly, the end of the song with the big vocal harmonies, like clean vocal harmonies, it kind of sounds a bit like Enslaved. All of this is so well crafted, to the point where I'd be hard-pressed to find anything that I didn't like in here. Like, I figured maybe at some point the synths would get annoying or they would draw out a song too long. And no, that didn't happen. In fact, the song that I thought would probably do that, because it seemed it was a little bit more synth-dominant, or at least the synths were more prominent in the song, Embrace the Chasm, I enjoyed it thoroughly. The song was loaded with killer riff changes, and the synths work well with the guitars. Like, they don't feel like an additional thing just kind of thrown in there on top, like, yeah, this will fill out the sound and, you know, whatever, give us a little bit of atmosphere. They feel purposeful. Like, they work with the music, they harmonize with the guitars. And in that song in particular, I like the fact that the guitars kind of moved back for a little bit in certain points and let the synths almost kind of take the forefront. They're a little bit more in the back of the mix, but honestly, that's kind of where I prefer them. But yeah, I dug the hell out of this. And I mean, I'll go ahead and say it, like, for the first time here, I feel like this is Abigail Williams kind of just doing their own thing and not trying to, you know, emulate their influences and trying to craft something that is like 100% theirs. Because with other albums, like, yeah, I could probably compare like different albums to different bands, like, you know, Emperor, or like a little bit of like Mayhem here and there. This, it's really hard to compare to any one band or any, you know, couple of bands. Like, this is a blend of a lot of different influences that have come together to create something that I would say is kind of 100% theirs. And I'll also go ahead and say I think this is their best album, like fucking hands down. I loved Walk Beyond the Dark. I thought that album was amazing. This one kind of did a lap around it. And this is getting a really strong 4.5 stars for me. I think this album is beautiful. It's haunting. It's engaging on a lot of levels, like not just musically, but when you can really, get into the themes a little bit more, because the themes are very relatable. And you can feel how personal this album is. And I love that kind of connection with an album, which that's become something I kind of look for now with like, more deep, heady albums that kind of explore human emotion and such. I want to be able to connect with it. That gives me like a whole other level of appreciation. But I'll even say, like, even without that, the music on here is fantastic. The most ambitious album I think this band has ever done. Wide-reaching across the whole black metal spectrum, but also across the metal spectrum too. Like, there are points in here, it's kind of hard to call it just black metal. Like, there are progressive flourishes. There are definitely some like more like blackened death metal moments too. It's dark, it's haunting, but it's also soaring and majestic. And yeah, I loved pretty much every second of this. In terms of like the if you're a fan of thing, like this is a little bit harder to kind of center in on. I would definitely say like there's elements in here that remind me of Panopticon and Wayfarer, but also Enslaved. There's also some just good straight up black metal, like more along the lines of like depressive or like post black metal as well. There might even be like some common lines here between this and the new Death Heaven, which I think is fantastic as well. I don't know, it's kind of hard to compare, but trust me, check it out. This album is fucking amazing. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They are only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members only live stream, which we will eventually get down to it. Unfortunately, again, John's got a lot of overtime that he has to work, and we want him to be involved in that live stream. So again, just be patient with us. It'll totally happen. But memberships are the main way to support the channel, and if you are interested in becoming a member, there's a join button down below for you to hit, smash, tickle, spit on, headbutt. Dealer's choice, really. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. Tons of content coming in the future, of course. We will eventually get down the Epgates ranking. Unfortunately, the work schedule thing has kind of pushed things back, but be patient with us. We're ready to record it. We just got to get the time to record it. Either way, you guys are fucking amazing. We love all the support, and again, we're gonna get down to some like bigger videos here soon, but we need some time to kind of free up for it. But you guys absolutely rule, and we will catch you later.